This presentation provides an overview of a strategic management framework and gives a brief introduction of how the management accountant can assist in the strategic management process. It is the first in a series of presentations that support the book Management Accounting in Support of Strategy. So what is strategic management? Strategic management is more than just producing a strategic plan. It is a process, and this is both fluid and iterative in nature. It is difficult to find an agreed definition of strategic management, but the common elements can be set out as follows. Having an overall sense of direction and purpose, formulating strategic goals and plans to achieve them, implementing the plans, and monitoring and evaluating performance and taking corrective action. The diagram shown here sets out a formal process for strategic management. The dotted lines illustrate the iterative nature of the process, as in reality organisations do not necessarily go through a series of steps one by one. Nevertheless, the diagram can form the basis of explaining how the process works. Let us start by looking at mission and objectives. The mission is the rationale behind the business. It sets out the long-term aims and purpose of the organisation, as well as indicating the strategy, values, policies and behaviour standards. Organisations often develop a vision alongside the mission. This is usually broader and shorter than the mission statement, and is often intended as a point of inspiration for employees to drive the business forward. The objectives are more specific and set out what the organisation aims to achieve. Ideally, they should be SMART, that is specific, measurable, agreed, realistic and time-bound. The accountant can contribute here by helping to develop a range of performance measurements that would evaluate the extent to which objectives have been achieved, plus ensuring that appropriate systems are in place to provide the information. If you think about it, there is little point in developing objectives and measures of performance that you can't actually measure. Environmental analysis. What we are looking for here are events, trends, or changes in the business environment that could affect the ability of the organisation to achieve its objectives. We are also looking for opportunities that we can take advantage of in order to develop the business further. In short, we are looking for opportunities and threats. The management accountant can assist here by monitoring specific aspects of the environment, for example interest rates, inflation, foreign exchange rates and perhaps the state of the economy. Competitor analysis is also part of the environment, and the accountant is well placed to evaluate the financial position of competitors and identify their relative strengths and weaknesses. Also, accountants are skilled at techniques such as scenario building and forecasting in order to evaluate the financial impact of changes in the business environment. Having looked at the environment, we need to look at the resources we have in order to deal with any changes in the environment. In the internal appraisal, we are reviewing the organisation's resources to assess the strengths and weaknesses. Accountants are able to provide an assessment of the financial strengths and weaknesses of the organisation. And there are a range of techniques where accountants can provide input into the analysis, such as a review of the products and markets in terms of portfolio analysis, the most well-known form of which is the Boston Consulting Group matrix. Allied to this is the assessment of the relative stage of products in the product life cycle and the financial implications of these. Also, the analysis of the customer portfolio via customer profitability analysis, and the analysis of the value creation system and its ability to generate profits via the competitive advantage. So now we have carried out an environmental analysis and identified the opportunities and threats, and an internal appraisal to assess the strengths and weaknesses. We can pull these together in the form of a corporate appraisal, or what is sometimes called a SWOT analysis. In the SWOT analysis, the strengths and weaknesses come from the internal appraisal and the opportunities and threats come from the environmental analysis. However, when we did the environmental analysis, we might have spotted a change, but had not yet assessed our ability to deal with it. The SWOT enables us to assess the ability to deal with changes given the current resources, and hence to determine if the change represents an opportunity or a threat. So the SWOT asks the question, given the changes in the environment, can we still meet the mission and objectives? If the answer is no, we have identified a gap between where we want to get to and where we will get to if we continue with the current strategy. This is often referred to as the profits gap. Here, the management accountant can evaluate how big the gap is, and more importantly, how big it will become if we do nothing about it. If we have identified a gap, we need to develop a strategy to close the gap. This is the options generation process. In reality, many organisations may not generate every possible option, but make small changes to their existing strategy. But the process allows for innovation and evolution of new strategies. Even reassessing the objectives in the light of the changes in the environment. For example, following the financial crisis of 2008, many organisations would have found it necessary to reassess the appropriateness of their objectives. Within options generation, the accountants have a range of techniques that can aid the process. Not least of these is the financial evaluation of potential strategic options in terms of investment appraisal techniques. It is also worth re-evaluating the competitive strategy at this point. For example, is differentiation still a viable strategy given the changes in the environment? Or, if the current strategy is that of cost leadership, can it be maintained? Evaluating these in financial terms can give an indication of what needs to be done in order to remain competitive and profitable. Once the options have been identified, we need to evaluate them and choose the most appropriate ones that help to close the gap. The evaluation is both strategic and financial. Ideally, a good strategy is one that builds on the strengths, addresses the weaknesses, grasps the opportunities, and avoids or minimises the threats. The management accountant is good at evaluating the various options in financial terms to make sure that they are sufficient to close the gap. There is also a range of techniques that help with specific options, such as target costing and pricing strategies in relation to new product development. Evaluating the financial viability of market entry methods for market development opportunities. This might even be undertaken via acquisition and merger, where the methods of company valuation become highly relevant. Even using techniques such as activity-based costing can be useful within the value creation system to identify where costs can be saved or more value added to customers to secure a competitive advantage. Now we come to the difficult part, which is implementing the strategic plan. The plan needs to be crystallised into an operational budget, but in a fast-changing environment does not want to be too rigid. It is also worth noting that changes in strategy may require changes to operations, and therefore we are also dealing with implementing change. However, in practice, many organisations do not make dramatic changes to their existing strategy, but we see a gradual shift over time. The management accountant needs to ensure that the information systems keep pace with the organisation. As the business grows and develops, the information requirements can change. Therefore, we need to make sure that the system can provide the right information and that the accounting techniques are still appropriate for the strategy adopted. A changing strategy might require a change in focus of the performance measurements. For example, a shift up market in terms of quality demands more attention on qualitative issues. It is also important to ensure that the reporting formats, focus of reports, and the information provided is appropriate for any changes in the strategy. Finally, we come to review and control. We need to make sure that the strategy is working, and therefore we need to review the performance against the plan and to take corrective action where necessary. This feeds back into the mission and objectives and closes the loop, which illustrates the continuous nature of the process. The management accountant here is continuing the work at the previous stage in ensuring that information systems are still providing the right information at the right time and to the right people. The reporting also needs a strategic focus, with more emphasis on the future impact of current performance rather than focusing on the past. We can learn a lot from the past, but it is much more important to review whether the current performance is on track to meet the future objectives. You may have noticed that there are dotted lines illustrating the feedback and iterations in the process of developing a strategy. When assessing options, we might address a weakness that alters the balance of the existing SWOT. Or when choosing and implementing an option, we could affect the environment. For example, developing a new technology that gives us competitive advantage, but also changes the environment in that all our competitors now need to catch up. Think of the internet and the impact that Amazon had on the retailing industry. That completes the brief explanation of a strategic management framework. I say a strategic management framework because in reality it can be much more fluid, and small organisations may not have the resources to undertake a full formal process. However, no matter how informal, there are always 4 key elements: analysis, formulation, implementation, review and control. And what we have seen in this presentation is that the accountant is capable of contributing to all stages of the process. Further presentations in this series provide more detail on specific aspects of the strategic management framework and cover some of the strategy models that can be used in the analysis, formulation, implementation and review and control of strategy, and of course the role of the management accountant. This presentation is provided as part of the support materials for the book Management Accounting in Support of Strategy, written by me, Graham S. Pitcher, and published by Business Expert Press.